All right, welcome everybody to the Lynn and Scott Show. I don't know what intro that was.
That was either the new intro or the old intro. One of the two.
That was one of the old ones.
White Boys, that was like really.
Yeah, that was, Lynn's not here, and I'm in charge of the buttons, and you're going to get what you get, people. So deal with it.
It's your fault.
That's
there
right.
You go. Blame him, Rex.
That's right. And that's what our topic is about today, blame. But before we get into the topic, I just want to remind everybody that if you're watching this show, it's important that you like it and you share it, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, but really share it with your friends and let us know what you think. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover, we spend a lot of time talking about everyday life and dealing with things. We also talk about business. We talk about pretty much everything. Even mortgages. Yes, even mortgages. So we cover it all. John? What's that?
I was asking how our rates. I just want.
Oh yeah, how are they, John?
You know what? It's not the rate; it's the relationship, Scott. That's all that
matters. and let's just say we have Mr. Awesome Speaker Eric Swanson in the chat right now. So hi, Eric.
We do. There we go. 4 awesome leaders right here. Eric, Mr. Awesome Swanson.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. And if you put information in the chat, we'll get to see it. So please share with us as we go. But anyway, we've got me, Scott Jones, Rex Sykes, Scott Schilling, and John Horton all with you. And who knows who else might show up. Again, Lynn taking a night off, got things to do. Today we're going to talk about blame because it seems like that's become a national pastime. It's almost more important. Well, let's put it this way. Correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but I don't ever remember a time where it was so much about blame and so little about solution. Most of the time, whether it's our media, and I don't think the media is all crooked, but I think they're skewed, and they're all skewed in their own directions. But it's all about blame, and in our politics, God knows it's all about blame, and even in our everyday lives. It's become very common when I'm talking to my friends and neighbors where we spend a lot more talking about what's wrong and who to blame for it. And very few people talk about what the solution is or what we can all do to make things different. And, let's start with that. Am I wrong? Was there a time when we were more involved in the solutions? Let's see. It's all about the relationships. Yeah. Relationship capital. That's for you, John. And it also says there should be a new Hollywood movie, call it The Blame Game. There we go. That should be a game show, The Blame Game. But was there a time when we were more solution oriented, or am I just fantasizing that we used to be more decent?
Well, I think we were solution oriented, but I think it was because we were responsibility oriented. We were responsible for what we did. When you talk about taking personal responsibility, the things that you get rid of are blame, shame, and justification. You get rid of those things because if you get, blame is it's your fault, shame is it's my fault, justification is let me tell you why. So, the fact is, if you get rid of those three things, you become personally responsible for it. And so what's happened is I think we've dished responsibility. And how do you dish responsibility? You do those three things. You either shame, well, I'm not smart enough to do it. Well, nobody's going to probably take that approach because then they're inferior or it puts them in an inferior situation. Justification, there's a whole lot of justification going on. And then the other one is blame. And so it's everybody else did it. Well, if everybody else did it by default, that means you didn't. And it's crazy. The reality is everybody has responsibility in everything at some point. We're all intertwined in all this thing. So I think that it comes. Yes, Scott, it seems like we didn't have as much of that because people stood up for their situation. They'd actually say, I messed up, I screwed up, I apologize. Let's fix this thing. Now it's everybody's dishing responsibility to every other party, so nobody's fixing nothing. And we get this just mess going on. And it can be a spiral of people accepting responsibility and say, I mean, there's got to be a big timeout. Everybody's got to go to the corner and just sit for a while. You got to call timeout and say, okay, dumbasses, you're the guys in the responsible positions. It's about time you take some responsibility and do the responsible things. But there's so many other dynamics going on right now. It's crazy. So, I mean, I think we've got to, yes, there was a different time because I think we took more responsibility. If we want to fix this stuff, we got to start taking more responsibility.
I like that. Now, here's something that's quite amazing. Karen, thanks for joining us. She says, way to go, Rex. And he hasn't spoken yet. So whatever you're doing, Rex,
how does Rex get kudos when he haven't opened his mouth? I see so many compliments about Rex, and he hasn't said a goddamn thing.
Eric is also sharing that it's time we were more solution-oriented until someone came up with the word entitled. Ugh. Now everyone wants to be entitled and an instant guru without going through the actual training. I'm wondering, does part of the idea that our lives are become so easy, and I'm not saying life is easier, but it requires less work because of computers, AI, instant information, all that stuff. Have we become lazy about taking responsibility? Is that part of the problem possibly? Rex, what do you think?
Well, I would let me try to trace some of this historically, and it won't be meaningful necessarily for everyone, or it's not the gospel truth. But when we were an agrarian society, we could pretty much blame God or the king, or the neighbor or ourselves for, the crops not growing right or the cattle getting out of the barn or whatever. When we became an industrial society, we were workers. We moved to the city. And so we could still blame those, but then the workers could be blamed, and they could also blame their bosses, and then they could blame, their neighbors more because we moved into a closer living arrangement. So we dealt with more people than we ever had before, and we had a different form of responsibility. We were being paid to work instead of working the land and taking that to market. So we had a big lifestyle shift as well as a mind shift. Now, if you go to the founding of our country, the United States, may not be true or applicable to everybody. The people at great risk and great peril came together because they had a vision of what they wanted instead of what was going on the other side of the pond. They were escaping tyranny to come here to create something, and because of that vision, they created a unification of the colonies. They created the Declaration of Independence. They created ultimately the 50 United States. And what's happened since that, the Industrial Revolution and our wars and everything else, is we've come to this thing where we think that a certain way of being is the only way to be, whether it's capitalism or socialism or communism or whatever else. We have our view of what's right, and we've given up this higher purpose, like democracy, and I don't mean just that, but I'm saying, this higher purpose of unification, of harmony, of cooperation, in order to crush and to kill and to maim and to hurt and to harm anybody who doesn't agree with us, politically, religiously, our neighbors or whoever it is. So it's really easy to blame everyone. Now, I agree on the sense, I don't know about the word entitlement, but everybody, there are people who want to fast track everything, and they don't want to do the work. And the difference between us today is now we got a lot of things that are being done for us when you say AI or the internet. I mean, the internet is a great thing that we have, and social media is wonderful, and it's used usually to do combat with each other. I say, I like this, and somebody goes, well, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Or I say, I like this, and have 10 points, 9 of which they all agree with, but the one that goes on forever is the 1 point that someone disagrees with, because that gets this life going. And then so people blame each other, and it's easy to do, but I think it's this kind of zero-sum mentality that we've developed where we either win everything or we get nothing. So we have to make sure that we win. And in order to do that, we have to blame everyone else, make everyone else wrong. And we create, and what happens in society is we've created more division and more strife and more hardship and more struggle and more, divorce from everything. because we just don't have a higher unifying purpose. Like, how about we all get along? How about we create a society or a world, globe, or a community or a neighborhood that works well? I mean, in other words, people should be coming together to solve things, not kicking each other in the face over, well, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard, or I don't like your idea, and then fighting over the ideas instead of remembering what their purpose is. And that's what's being missed. I'd rather fight you is somehow the thing than actually solve things. So we have to come back to a place where we go, there are problems and there are solutions. Let's together focus and cooperate on figuring out how we solve it and work together in order to make that happen. Because, a house divided, united we stand, divided we, all that kind of stuff. So we've got to find a way to work together and to he said, the Lord of the Flies. I don't know if you post, but yeah, I mean, in other words, it's so true.
Well, Rex, you made a good point about, that drive to win and to be ahead. But I think what's happened is it used to be my drive to be ahead was a drive to work on me. Now a drive to be ahead is a drive to sabotage those around me so that I rise to the top. It's become more common now. I don't have to be the fastest runner. I just got to convince everybody that everybody else is slower than me. I don't actually have to beat them anymore.
I don't disagree with that, other than I think there's certainly aspects of that that's true. I think the idea is that we keep being taught by media, and I love the media, so don't get me wrong. I mean, some have agendas and some don't, but the point is, all of the messages, whether it's press or television or social media or your friends or your neighbors or your parents or your educator, whatever it is, we're being impressed that in order for you to succeed, somebody else has to fail.
Yeah.
You have to crush your competition. We've lost this, like, let's all get in the boat and travel to one destination. It's like, get in your own boats and whoever gets there first gets the prize. Now, that's not only today. That's always been. Yeah. There's always been some form of competition or race or jousting, in the old days. But it seemed like, it wasn't just to the victor go all of the spoils, which is, it was. But what I'm saying is that now, because we're united in social media, we can fight more. Everything seems exasperated, and our world is much smaller and it's more condensed. And so the problems that we face today are far more immediate to us than they were if you lived, out in the middle of nowhere and got your news 6 or 8 months later. We're getting everything instantly, so we can instantly go, that's wrong, that's bad, I don't like that, and I don't like that person, and they shouldn't be doing this. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of reasons for why it is. The point is, who cares?
Yeah, I agree.
Why it exists may not answer how do we change it or how do we affect it in a more positive way. And like
we make a lot of snap judgments on that, based on all that information coming in without having a whole lot of information. It's usually you got people reading a Google headline and they think they figured out the secrets to the universe. So, John, you're in a position where you work in an industry where it's really, there's a lot of negativity around financial and mortgage and all those kind of things, but you seem to keep this positive spin. How do you do that?
It's all mindset, like we've talked about before. And the funny thing is I think two things you need to look for is you got to watch who you blame, because you could have someone, and again, we've been talking about it, and it's been a big thing, very important thing, your mental status. I mean, if you blame someone that has some kind of mental status, that could put them over the edge. You know what I mean? It's almost like you have to share the blame. If I did something wrong, eventually I will. It's going to happen one day. Don't worry about it. But I'll take blame. I mean, I've done a ton of shit wrong. But I think if you're going to throw blame on someone, you really want to make sure, you've done your research. And number one, you shouldn't do that anyway. If there's something wrong, both people are party to it. And again, on the financial side, I talked to somebody today. And, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? It's having a conversation. Pick up the goddamn phone. Stop texting. Stop emailing. Yeah. Pick it up. And Scott, you and I have talked about this. Man, it's some lady texted me today, and she has this question, and she specifically says, "I hate the phone," and I've known her for 15 years. But she asked me this question, and it doesn't really come back to blame or not, but it was a question, and I said, "I know you don't like the phone. I need you for 2 minutes. This will not come over well on text, because then guess what? I'd be the one to blame." She's like, "I'll call you tomorrow at 9 o'clock." I'm like, "Why can't you just call me now?" Just loves to text. Again, I think you just need to watch where the blame is going. You need to be, if there's a mistake, customer side, client side, you're both at fault. There's no way anyone is always 100% at fault. I think you got to be willing to step up to the bat. And I always say, I've said it for 30 years, if it's a problem on Monday, it's a shit show on Friday. Get it out of the way on Monday. At least that way you can work through the blame, work through the issues. So I just think it's like just growing up and picking up the phone, man. It's not rocket science. It's not going to end well, but it will end well if you face it earlier and accept half of that blame.
Now, both these guys, and Eric in the comments, it is responsibility, and blame, whether it's self-blame or blame of others, doesn't resolve anything. All it does is identify what the problem is, or what you think the problem is, what you think the issue is, but it doesn't solve anything. And what we need to do is stop blaming and stop explaining and stop giving all the reasons for why things aren't the way they should be or ought to be or could be or all of that stuff, and just make it a point of saying, if I want it, it's that saying, if it's to be, it's up to me. Or I always like to say, if it's going to come true, it's up to you. Put it on, is the idea that you have to be accountable for your own mistakes, and there may be consequences, but whatever, and you have to be responsible for the life that you create for yourself and or for other people. And if everybody did that, we'd have a much different world. Everybody may not do that, so you have to go, all right, so if they're not going to do it, what can I do? Instead of going, they're wrong, they're bad, they're holding me back, they're preventing me. That's why Henry Ford's statement, I never let what I cannot do prevent me from doing what I can. So not let other people or circumstances or events prevent you from doing what you can do to have the kind of life you want, or to be compassionate, loving, and kind for other people. Now, one more thing I want to address that I'm going to, but Eric mentioned about people doing the fast track or what. There's this huge push right now of everybody be a coach for the person. I mean, at one time it was here, come to a self-development workshop and work on yourself and be good. Now it's come to a self-development seminar and learn how to be a coach, and so they just, you don't even have to know anything anymore. Just be a coach. And if you're 2 steps ahead of somebody, turn around and teach them. And I'm like, well, you can be 2 steps ahead of somebody going off a cliff. That doesn't, what you want is to have people who get experience, who have the chops. I don't want an inexperienced brain surgeon. I don't want an inexperienced heart surgeon. I don't want an inexperienced anything. I want people who have done the work and who can walk the talk and who do so with integrity because they've been there. What kind of coach could you be if you don't have any experience coaching? So
yeah, exactly. Well, I think you said a very key word before, Rex. Hey, Barry, and that word was consequence.
Yeah,
and that's one of the words that seemingly has fallen out of the English language. That there's less adherence to consequences than there were in the past. We knew if we did something, there would be a consequence to that thing, whatever that might be, right? And if we don't hold people responsible, it's interesting how it comes back to the word responsible. If we don't hold somebody responsible, if there's no consequence for their actions, stuff just happens, right? So, again, a big part of this all is, and I agree with you. We had that same talk today. There used to be 1 million coaches. Now there's 6 million. Yeah. I'm sure the need is that much greater. The fact is, it reminds me back in 2008 when everybody with great expertise got pushed out of corporate America. Hey, you know what you should do? You should be a speaker. You got no clue how to speak, but you got a lot of experience not speaking. So that's really good.
But to your point, Back in those days, if you were good and you had merit, you got paid to speak. Now everybody wants you to pay to speak. So if you got the money but aren't any good, you can still find a place to speak, or you can speak like we're doing, free on the air.
Yeah, no, but again, that's the thing, that it's, you study. I mean, I'm fortunate to have had 19 mentors that I've studied under, and you work to take that information and then translate it to the next level. That's part of, being learned up to your profession or to what you're doing, that it's an assimilation of all that information over time. So now that Barry's here, let's get to the real answers. Barry, jump in.
Well, I'm just listening to the last part you said, because unfortunately I couldn't get in the group, but I would just add one piece to this, because I've been a student in the personal development field for 40 years. So I have learned a lot of things over the times. I made lots of mistakes and that sort of thing. So I do, and even though I'm not a coach, and frankly I hate the term coach, because there's so many 20-somethings that got a coach label without having any life skills to go with the term life coach.
Yeah.
So I have all the life stuff. I don't have a coaching license. I just call myself a guide, facilitator, expert, something like that. And the challenge is that in the world, people tend to buy into labels too easily. Thank you, Eric. Yeah. Anyway, back on track. Sorry, I had another thought to go with that. But the thing is that it is so much what's going on in the world is where people who basically don't want to take responsibility for themselves or do their own due diligence to see if they want to learn from certain people or certain books or certain teachers, certain politicians. They just blindly say yes to people because they assume the label they see is the truth.
Right.
And, any coach, and it's interesting, I've had a back and forth argument with this with one of my coaches, is any coach that doesn't offer a complimentary discovery session first, do you trust that or don't you? It's like, for me, I was considering putting like a fee on my discovery sessions, but I thought, hang on a second, if they don't know me, why would I want them to pay me before they've even had a chance to experience my work? So I made it back to being free again, because that seems honorable and fair. So there's always these things about how do you sell your experience, how do you sell your skills, and also how do you have people invest in you? Do you build a relationship first? Or because that's the other thing is relationship building, it comes before they become a client, ideally. Anyway,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Could jump in. I was just.
I had a guy approached me in the 90s wanting to do my workshops and couldn't afford it, and asked me if I would write with him. And he went out and he wrote a small book, and then he went out and got a fake PhD. And I said, why did you get this? Why did you buy this PhD? He said, well, it helped me sell books and tapes. I said, well, why don't you just go get a real PhD? And that would be a whole lot cooler. He goes, I don't have the time to do that. Well, he couldn't afford to get into my programs. He couldn't afford the home study program. He couldn't afford anything. And he sent me a copy of a galley copy of a book he had written. And it was researched. I mean, he had no experience in any of it. So he researched this kind of library researched book. It wasn't very good. He ultimately did get it published, but it wasn't very good. But in the meantime, he sent me a book that he did self-publish. And on it, he said he was a master practitioner and trainer of neurolinguistic programming, which he'd never been in a program. He'd never done a course. He'd never done anything. He couldn't afford my courses, and I'd been talking, and I called him and said, well, here's how this ends. I'm not going to write with you. I'm not going to endorse your other book because you lied on this book. You got a fake PhD, and now you're using terms which they're not trademarked. They don't have any initial value of it in and of themselves, but they're recognized terms in a particular field. And you just like co-opted. He said, well, I don't care. It'll help me sell books and tapes. Well, guess what? He ended up selling books and tapes and having a speaking career based on a lie. Now, since then, because he's done things, he's gotten some experience. But that's not how I think people ought to get into the business. And it was predicated on all this stuff. So, there's so many people who are willing to do whatever they can in order to get a market share or to have a name or to be impressive or to impress on people, which, by the way, I hate that phrase. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to impress upon you. Of course you're here to impress me, or you wouldn't use that stupid, lame phrase. And so, but the thing is there's a value in apprenticeship, and what Scott was saying about having 19 mentors. That's an investment of time and energy and effort. That's being, wrong and right and corrected and adjusting and doing that, and however long it takes in order to get good at something. And, in the old days, the idea of being an apprentice and a craftsman or a fellow craft until you became a master at something was the way of the world, whether you were a master electrician, a master carpenter, a master stonemason, whatever it might have been. You went through a process to get good in order to be called a master. And now it's just anybody that has the internet or, whatever can hang up any shingle or do anything they want and call themselves whatever they want. And any of these hundreds of different letters that go either in front or behind your name really don't matter much, because you may or may not have actually earned them.
Apprenticeship.
I actually did a talk one day, and everybody else had doctor before or all sorts of letters after, and so I had them introduce me as Scott Schilling, PPC, professional persuasive communicator. So, I gave myself a title, but I mean, you're right, Rex. The thing is when you work with the masters over time, you learn to respect the mastery and what they've done to get there and all the different things, with Jack Canfield having W. Clement Stone as his mentor. Right. And just the mentor line, of who has learned from whom and all the things going through. Right. But I agree with you wholeheartedly, Barry. It comes back down to a couple different things. People do business with those they know, like, and trust. You have to have trust ahead of when they're ready to take action. So how do you gain trust? You gain trust by developing a relationship. Mm-hmm. And Absolutely. So trust has to be built ahead of the need for the relationship.
Yeah.
I want to add, because, back in the 80s and the 90s, there were a handful of us globally that taught neurolinguistic programming. And I could tell, as probably all of the other ones could tell, who students because of what they quoted, how they quoted it, what they did, because students tend to, mimic the mistakes as well as the good things of their teachers or trainers. So you could tell. Well, once the internet exploded, I mean, people tell me all the time, "Oh, I have a certification in NLP, and I was studied with so and so," and I'm like, I don't have a clue who that is. And to tell me you have a certification in NLP, you might as well say, "Hey, I threw $100 in the street." I'm like, "Oh, but I don't care." I mean, it doesn't mean anything to me anymore, because. But one of the things that is fascinating with all of these coaches and all of the people today is, I can still tell who really has learned by who they quote or who they attribute quotes to.
Yeah. Or whether they even bother to attribute.
Well, yeah. And my pet phrase is, if you wait long enough, all quotes will be attributed to Tony Robbins.
There's some truth to that.
Well, I was going to go with Al Gore, but that'll work too.
No, but I mean, there are certain people who, it was Jim Rohn or Zig said this or something, but somebody will say, well, Tony said this, and it was Moses who said that in the Bible, and you go, well, so, and I'm not picking on Tony. I'm just saying that there are, people are misquoting people all the time. And I hear this and I'm like, well, you didn't really do much other than hear, one person say this, and now you're quoting that person as if it's theirs, as opposed to doing the legwork and finding out who actually said it before them. And, maybe you don't have to do that, but if you're going to present yourself as an expert or an authority in your field, you ought to at least know who to attribute what to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very much so.
I'm not sure where we turned the corner from the blame game to the coach, the shell game of coaching.
Well, we're blaming the coaches.
We're going to blame all the coaches.
Well, we're blaming those. We're blaming those who are claiming to be coaches.
Yes.
Without the years of struggle and having their ass kicked.
Well,
along the way.
I've thought, and I've been talked about, people talk to me about, do the coaching thing because I'm good with people, in front of people. But that's not who I am. Who I am, I like to educate people on certain processes and certain things, and I like to buck this system. I like to, fix the narrative on addiction and mental health and those things. I'd like to change those things. I don't, you know what? I look at the pattern of my life and I'm like, listen, if you want a reverse barometer coach, I'm the guy. I'm the perfect guy for the reverse barometer. Whatever I frickin' say, do the opposite. Your life is going to be great. Let me tell you. But I don't feel the need to have that kind of, I see it for some people as a need to share, and it's a good need to share, a want to help. But for most people, I see it as a need to control and a need to rise above the pack.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just the wrong way to do things, you know? I'll tell you, I learned more from being around the right people, not just sometimes. And I certainly have had some mentors in my time, but I surround myself with people who want to make a difference. And I learn more on a daily basis drinking coffee with somebody who's in that tribe than I would ever learn anywhere else. And that's what I like to do. But
well, Scott, you're coaching from experience. You know, you're coaching from what you've lived and or the mirror image of it. And
right.
And from you're either coaching from what you've lived or the lessons learned from what you've lived, which that's all experience, and over time experience turns into wisdom. The only way that you get wisdom is time.
Yeah.
And
time being that you get experience in that time. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the combination. And that's why, again, I mean, I think it's the same thing. I was talking to somebody the other day, 23 years old. What are you? I'm a life coach. Of what? What have you experienced at 23?
You just got your driver's license 6 years ago. I think you need a little more time on that.
Well, I want to ask this. I know what a basketball coach is. I know what a swim coach is. I know what a football coach is. I know what a boxing coach is. But what is a life coach?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be responsible. I'm a life coach. I'm coaching you for your whole existence.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, that would indicate that I have experience in every aspect of life, and I know exactly what to do. And guess what?
Not only
I ain't that God. In the mornings I talk to that guy, but I ain't that guy.
But you also have experience enough to help all of the people who come to you and coach them in their life. That's pretty audacious.
That's the insanity. Yeah.
I mean, I think people who stick to like certain specialties in certain areas, those are the ones you really want to go to. Not the guy who says I can fix everything.
Right.
You know, I don't want the guy who can fix my air conditioner, rotate the tires on my car, doing brain surgery on me because he says I can do everything. I want to go to an air conditioning guy. I want to go to a mechanic, and I want to go to a surgeon. Why wouldn't we do the same things with different areas of our life?
Because we're
Barry,
lazy.
What were you trying to say, Barry?
Well, to say, because there's a couple of things, if I remember what they were now. One of the things is that, people, I've said in my marketing stuff that I'm known as the love doctor to my clients and friends because they call me that. I can't claim it because, first of all, I've been sued that I can't use it professionally because somebody got the trademark on it, of all things. But I can still be called the love doctor by my friends because that's an affectionate name. But the thing is, this, and I said earlier, like you said, Scott, the whole calling yourself a life coach when you're 22 years old is ridiculous. But the thing about this whole job of being a teacher or a guide or a facilitator is, frankly, the people who seek you out ideally are further down the ladder than you are, but recognizing that ladder doesn't stop where you are. You're on the ladder with people above you. Sure. And one of my coaches said this, and now, so I have a coach myself, is any good coach has a coach. And I would say, and again, I hate the term coach, but any person who's teaching needs to have a good teacher.
Yeah.
Because that's the way you learn, because you can't stop where you want to think you know everything, because you don't, because there's more life ahead of you, unless you're dead,
So, Barry, why don't you trademark the other love doctor?
Because that's going to create a whole nother level of confusion. I call myself basically like a love expert. Is because it's vague enough. People go, "What does that mean?" Because then they ask me, and I can tell them. I know lots of things about how to have love that works in your life and how to have a attractive, healthy relationship.
Let's trademark the world's #1 authority in love.
Yeah, that's dangerous. I was on a podcast last week. They interviewed me, and she called me a relationship guru, and I was like, I never claimed that. So that's the thing.
I think that's funny. People are looking for titles like it's got to be, I think you're the #1 love influencer, quite frankly, Barry. It's I mean,
compared with who? Compared with who, though?
But that's the whole point, right? Is people are so wrapped up in titles and stuff like that. That's where, again, let's get back to the blame thing, right? Is I'm, one person smarter than another, one person has got this title, so they must be, I got a, the old days of, oh yeah, I'm an MBA, I got a major bank account, right? Or he's got a PhD, pilot higher and deeper, I mean, and all the different stuff, right? It's just, it's crazy. Eric said it in the chat, about how many people have doctors in front of, it's like, dude, we know these people, I mean, like, come on, sir, it's like, come on, right? And why are we, why not just fess up to all the good, the bad, the ugly that we've all lived? There's nobody who's lived a perfect life, or maybe the guy that, Sunday, but other than that, the rest of us haven't done, we've had our challenges, we've had our stuff, but that's what's, smoothed out the diamond, right? I mean, we've been under the pressure, we've had the edges knocked off, we've had the stuff. Nobody's life is perfect.
Taking responsibility for your own experience, your own challenges, your own growth is the only way to navigate this. Frankly, people don't do that. We keep blaming other people, like saying, and this is the thing we talk about with codependency, is we have the real tendency to put the blame on somebody else because we're not willing to do our own work, which is where the problem lies.
Well, I think. Did I cut you off? Sorry.
No, that's right. I was just mumbling the end of that.
No, I was just going to say that, when we hold a flashlight, whatever is highlighted by the flashlight is outside of us over there somewhere. And when we blame, we're putting it outside of us and over there rather than looking at ourselves and going, how can I be better? We're saying they need to be better. They need to do different instead of how can I be different? I may or may not be able to change you or the circumstances of the events, but I certainly can change how I react or respond to those events.
Absolutely.
That's within my control. And if I don't do it and I sit there and blame myself and go, oh, well, you stupid idiot, I do it. Well, that's just wasting time. So you might as well go, I did the best I could with what I had at the time. Now, what do I need to do next in order to move forward in a way that is useful for me and the other people as well? This whole idea of it's your fault. No, 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 it's your fault. Gets us nowhere. And it just goes back to, the person with the more might, ends up winning. That's, again, zero sum. It's, I could beat you into submission, either by my words or by my actions or by something, or I can outspend you or I can do whatever, as opposed to saying, look, you're on the planet. How can you be the best? And I want to be careful with this because I don't think anybody has to be their best. You don't have to, there's nothing saying you have to be better than you are today. Unless, of course, you want to. And if you want to, then there's things you can do for it. Right. And you can move forward in that way. But somebody will say, well, you're not doing your best. You go, so what? What's it to you? I mean, if I'm going to sit and, suffer, then let me sit and suffer. We have so much where we try and put things on other people and other, our rules and our values and our beliefs and all this stuff that we just dump on people about how they should be or how the world should be or how the event should be or even how I should be, like, how about just letting that go and just going, you know what, let's find a way to get better together and travel as far together as we can and cooperate in that process.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot. I tell a lot of people, because dealing with people with addictions, mental health disorders, there's a lot of blame going around. Well, I became a heroin addict because of this, or this, or this, or it was my parents, or parents want to take on blame, or there's just blame is really big in my industry. Let's just put it that way. It's a money maker, people. But when I say we have to eliminate blame and just take responsibility to do what we can to better ourselves, better our lives, they're like, well, I want to know what caused. And I'm like, causal is not the same as blame. Looking for something that's causal that may have, where the fire got sparked is fine. It's good for me to know that. That's fine. But if I was to blame, that's me standing back, folding my arms and saying, you did this. I'm not a part of this. But if I see the cause, then I can immediately assign, now where's my responsibility? What can I do? So they are two different things. It doesn't mean you don't look for causes of problems. It's not the same as looking for blame. Blame is an absolution of responsibility. Cause is simply, where's my part in the process? I don't know if that makes sense, but I just want to make sure people understand. Nobody's saying don't look for the beginning of a problem, because sometimes you need to solve it. But it's not the same as blaming everybody.
No, so something I want to share, just this is brought up, reminded us about responsibility. I was back in the seminar back in the 80s, so it still comes up in the conversation, is that lots of times people will say that it's not my fault, therefore I'm not taking responsibility, because they disown it somehow.
Right.
So there's a spectrum that's going to happen. So it's not like it's clearly your fault, therefore you need to handle it. Some people just don't know how to take responsibility. And there's this framing I remember learning, which was CPA, which is create, promote, or allow, depending on the degrees of how much you're involved in what happened. If you actually went out and you lit the firework underneath the car and the car got caught fire, you're responsible for that. But the thing is, if you see someone doing it and you don't stop them, or you don't say anything about it to the owner of the car, then you're basically promoting. You're in a way you're allowing it. The promotion piece is an interesting one, because it's kind of like you nudge somebody else to go do it. So you're not responsible, but you still made it happen. So there's all these different ways we play with things in life, where basically if we don't look at it from the lens of authenticity, we say, what ownership do I have in what happened? That's where responsibility starts. But most people aren't willing to do that because they're afraid to be at cause or make themselves feel wrong, because they judge themselves. Blame is one of those things that the flip side of blame for me is shame, clear enough, because we're not willing to take responsibility or even say, you know what, mea culpa, I screwed up. We don't do that much, unfortunately. If we did, boy, we'd change the planet. If the government did that. That's right.
It starts with us. It starts with us.
Yeah. So it starts with every individual. Again, that's where we were going earlier, with blame, shame, and justification, for sure. The fact is, if we would just identify, it's like we've talked about before. When I sales train, people make sales way too hard. It's 4 words: identify problem, provide solution. We've got problems. We've got challenges. Okay, let's identify them. Okay, now let's provide a solution. It doesn't say identify problem, blame the bastard that created it, then find a solution, right? Yeah. There's not that middle section in there, right? It's let's get after this thing. Okay, we've identified it. We've got a challenge here. Let's fix it. What could we do to fix it? What would make some sense? What are the possible? There's typically never just one fix to a situation. There are multiple potential fixes to the situation. Why not look at them? Why not look at multiples?
It may be worthwhile to say, what does blame serve? It serves to deflect, it serves to distract, it serves to protect, it serves to, belittle. I mean, there's a number of things that
elevate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it serves people, and so they do that because they think they're going to somehow be fulfilled, and maybe they do it, non-consciously out of habit, because that's all we kind of know. Right. But it's still it's serving a purpose. Now, most of us, I would imagine, know the notion of reframing. You put a different frame, a different word. People. I think that Pollyanna is the most disparaged person on the planet, because everybody goes, "Oh, who wants to be Pollyanna?" Well, I do. I want to look at things. I want to look at the good side of stuff. I don't want to look at the crap. And so all Pollyanna did was find the good in things and then say, "Hey, everybody, did you know this?" And they go, "Oh, you sappy, syrupy little kid. Well, how could you? How dare you?" I mean, if you're not positive thinking, what is the alternative? Negative thinking, crappy thinking, shitty thinking. I mean, So, but the idea of reframing, it may not be accurate. It may not be true in the true way of things. But if you accept responsibility for everything, I'm responsible for them. I'm responsible for what they do. I'm responsible for the world. I'm responsible for events. I'm responsible for circumstances. I'm responsible for my own reactions. I'm responsible for everything. It does put you at cause, which Barry used the word before. And, science says there's a cause and then there's an effect. And for every cause, there's an effect. And for every effect, there's a cause. And a lot of people spend all their time trying to find the cause. But the point is that, and there's correlation, but the point is that if you take responsibility, whether it's accurate or not, say, hey, it's up to me to figure out how to make this better for me and for the people I love and care for, or for everyone involved. and stop putting the onus on the circumstances, the events, or other people, even if it's not absolutely true and it's only a reframe, it becomes power. It puts you back in the driver's seat. It gets you back at cause instead of being a victim or at effect of everything else. And that's the thing, that blame usurps your power, and it takes away from you the energy, like a leaky battery. I mean, you ultimately end up draining yourself because you spend all this time putting the energy out there instead of feeling fulfilled from the inside, because you're the seat of your own power and your own seat of influence and your own seat of action.
Absolutely. We had talked about this we've talked about it a number of times on this show of, again, going back to, God, what was the point? It is, why would you want to give away all that power? Because you've got the decision-making ability to take the next action if you're responsible for it, right? I mean, if you're at the center of it, why wouldn't you take and make the decision that could create that proactive, potentially positive result, from everything? And we've talked about this a lot on this show over the various shows that we've done, that we're part of it. I think, I hate the fact that we're being lied to by so many people consistently, and we're being told we're not. So we're being convinced that we're not being lied to, which is creating a habit of it's okay to lie, of which it's not, because we're again giving up that power, but it's being impressed upon us. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a frickin' duck, and something goes waddling past you quacking, and you go, oh, look, it's a chicken. It ain't a frickin' chicken, it's a duck. Stop calling a chicken stop calling a duck a chicken. It's ridiculous. But that's where the speed of information flow with the internet and everything that's going on, right, is and now with AI, I mean, the ability to create fake this and fake that, that's where the hazard gets more immediate, faster. And so now, where's the critical thinking? I mean, it was weird. I was thinking, because I'm going to produce some more What Now Wisdoms, and that one of them, I just was walking to, I want to do one. Where's common sense? What happened to common sense? We've heard that common sense isn't so common anymore, but what happened to it? Where did it go? Why did we stop? It's almost like levels of other shit got put on top of it and it just got pressed down, and people aren't doing the critical thinking and they're not being trained up into how to do the critical thinking. All us old farts that are on this, we were taught to think critically. I mean, it's the only way that we could do it way back when. Now it's a machine thinks for you.
Well, it's the laziness approach. The thing is, it takes effort, it takes willingness, it takes getting outside your own bubble to actually learn things and find out what's going on, to know what the truth is. Yeah. Unfortunately, most people want to be spoon-fed, so they don't want to do any work.
Well, the ultimate side to the lies and being spoon-fed and the repetition of the lies, or the repetition of outrageous behaviors or whatever, creates apathy. It creates a numbness. It creates people going, oh God, I want to opt out of that. So the more you're bombarded by the same stuff, it's just like if you go to work in a factory and it's really loud the first few days, after a while, your brain accommodates it and makes the noise. You can see that, if anybody's ridden a motorcycle, you get your first motorcycle and you're yelling at the person next to you, and a week or two later, you're just talking to the person next to you because your brain deletes it. Now, there's a mathematician named Polya who wrote a book called Mathematics and Plausible Reasoning, who said essentially, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and walks like a duck, it's a duck. His premise is, and it's a beautiful premise, he goes, about three things demonstrate that it's a duck. Anything you add after the three, pretty much people will tune out. They'll forget, they won't know. It doesn't add to the argument. So if you go, it looks like a duck, it has white feathers, it's got yellow beak, it's got flat feet, it's got webbed feet, it has and it quacks like a duck. And I mean, the more that you keep adding, you go after about 2 or 3 of them, you go, okay, I get it. It's a duck. And the more that you add, and the more that you keep going, doesn't do anything. But we're bombarded by blames and by lies and by, falsehoods and by distractions and everything else. So that people just go, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to watch the news anymore. I'm not going to be informed. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to opt out. And that's how you control people.
Yeah.
Rex, you touched on something a few minutes ago, and Scott picked up on it. And I just want to, there used to be this old thing about not in my backyard, it's like, I'll protect my family. I'll take care of the people I got to take care of, but I don't want problems in my neighborhood, in my backyard and stuff. Guess what? The world is in your backyard now. Yeah. The entire world is in your backyard because of media, because of the connections, because I could say something and blame somebody and be evil online. And within seconds, there's a guy in Djibouti that picks up on it and goes out and hits somebody with a hatchet. I mean, this is what the world we live in now. We have to be globally responsible and responsible personally. And this whole blame thing, it can't work anymore. It's easy back in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's blame Russia. Let's blame this, because we weren't all connected, but we're connected now. And we need to do better than that. We need to do better, and people need to step up. And we've been talking about AI and the loss of responsibility for gaining knowledge, because knowledge is too easy to gain. We've lost the responsibility to grow because we're all entitled. We've lost the responsibility to do all these things. So we lose the responsibility not only to ourselves, but to the people that we love and the world. Because like I said, everybody is in your backyard now. It's a different world. And all the blame in the world is not going to make it better. The only thing that's going to make it better when everybody stands up and somebody gets punched in the eye somewhere in China, I got to stand up and say, I am responsible because I am part of a human race. The human race is no longer separated. It's not. We are a global unit, and we need to start looking out for each other. I fear that we're not going to go that way, but I pray and I hope and I will live as if we are going to go that way. So
well, we're at a fairly critical point. We talk about this many times on this show too. It's called making the power of choice and making decisions.
We love you too, Lynn.
We have the choice to start treating people with respect, honor, and dignity. That's why a number of years ago, I just started pounding the drum of let's return respect, honor, and dignity. Respect doesn't say that I have to agree with you. It just says that I should respect you. Honor is lifting you up. That provides dignity. If we have a more dignified world, you don't attack each other. You don't do those things. I mean, my wife told me about this, this thing in New York City now where women are just walking along and somebody will just punch them in the face. What the hell? Why? Where does that come from? Okay, well, now that it's come, let's get it to go away. That's just, it's not acceptable. Right. Because if it starts there, then where does it go? And if we publicize it's happening, where does it go from there? It goes back to the consequence word again. There's got to be a consequence for doing it. It is not an appropriate thing to do.
Well, part of the solution is that the consequences should be immediate and appropriate. If the consequences, if the punishment is too extreme, that's not good either. But it needs to be swift, and they have to be held accountable immediately. Stuff that drags on forever just gives people a license to continue.
All right, we're down to about 5 minutes. I want to give everybody a quick go around, to talk about this. Wrap up whatever you want to wrap up for today. John, why don't you kick us off, buddy?
Yeah, I've been just so enthralled in the geniusness, I haven't been able to speak, actually. So
the geniusness? I love the word.
I've been taking notes as I do.
Oh, boy.
He is Kellen Ann Jr.
Just real quick. I mean, I tell you my favorite quote, which I'm going to send to my team as soon as I get up tonight. You always want to be 2 steps ahead of your competition unless you're on a cliff. That was the best thing I've heard in my 32 years of life. The other thing is, I think if you're doing the relationship, you got to be consistent because then you're going to get your productivity. If
Yep.
you do the relationship but you're not consistent, you're going to get shit. Over and over. You're never going to bother people, but when you start doing the relationship and the consistency, you'll see the productivity. A good coach is going to get you results. Everybody, like you said, wants to be a coach. Could I be a coach? Fuck no. There's no way I could be a coach. You can be your best bud. I can tell you how to do your mortgages. I'm not going to coach you. I'm going to refer you to someone. If you don't get that productivity, you're screwed. And everyone is a case-by-case basis. Everyone. You can't treat anyone the same. Lastly, believe it or not, servant leadership. I had a company I started with a few years ago. I never knew what it meant. Servant leadership. If you don't know what it is, look it up. When you do it, man, people will follow you. They'll flock to you. They'll work with you. They know you got their back, and you're 100% with them. So what was the other one? The only time, that was the other one. The only time you get wisdom is with time. So that's it. I'm done quoting you, smart son of a bitches. I'm out.
Oh, Barry, 60 seconds. What do you think, buddy?
So much you said. Thank you, John. Back to the thing about the blame game. If you're not willing to look at yourself in the mirror and be honest with yourself, you're doomed to fail in the first place. And if you're blaming other people so you can feel better about yourself, it's a false win. So ultimately, I keep saying that, there's a quote I love using as well, which I heard from one of my teachers many years ago. It's like, when all else fails, try honesty. Tell yourself the truth, and then tell people the truth. Not the truth you've made up or the truth you read online. What's true for you, how you feel, what's authentic, what's real. And start building relationships that way, because then everything around you become the same way, which is honest, authentic, caring, responsible, and compassionate. You want to have a healthy life? Build it around you.
Oh, thanks, Barry. Thanks for showing up without the roof. And glad to see you saved. In spite of construction, you saved the pineapple, and that's all good. Scott,
amazing they didn't knock that down.
What do you say, Scott?
Another excellent session with everybody, because there's so many great parts of this topic and everything. I mean, it comes down to personal responsibility, and we live in such a flash, immediate gratification, me, now society. Slow down a little bit, and fine, let it be about you, but don't tell everybody about everything. If everybody cares. Just have a nice life. I mean, really realize that we were put here to expand, that we were put here to have a wonderful life and to serve each other, I think, as well, John, servant leadership and everything like that. I quote Zig every day. You can have everything in life you want when you help enough other people get what they want. There's some goodness that comes out of the learning that you do through your life. Do a little more learning, study some of the masters, the Zig Ziglars, the Dale Carnegies, the Earl Nightingales, the Og Mendinos, the Jim Rohns, the W. Clement Stones. Wait a second. I don't even know who those guys are. Check them out.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Rex?
Well, I agreed with everything that you said earlier, Scott, but I disagree with the world is in our backyard. It's in your ass pocket. It's in your back pocket. That's where the world is for most people now, and they seldom get off of this thing.
Yeah.
So understand there's humans out there that you can connect with, live with, serve, and love, and be loved by, and enjoy the life that you have. Don't just use it to text.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And all of you, thank you so much. I agree. Scott, you said you don't have to tell everybody everything. And that goes especially for you vegans out there. Tell me you're a vegan once and then be done with it. I don't need to hear it every conversation. Thank you very much. I want to thank Rex Sykes, John Horton, Scott Schilling, and, of course, Barry Selby. And our big shout out to Lynn Serrano, who wasn't here tonight, but who put this madcap group of people together. And somehow it just stuck. And sometimes shit sticks together. You just don't know why it works. It just does. Proud to see you guys every week. Thank you for being here. And thank you all for watching.
Share out the show.
Share the show.
Share.
Have a
We'll
good
catch you
night.
next time right
share,
here.
comment.
Grab
Thank you.